I worked as a 911 dispatcher in Washington, D.C. for almost 5 years. Most nights were pretty standard. Domestic disputes, car accidents, noise complaints, the usual city chaos. It's a stressful job, but you learn to stay detached. That changed one night in late December of 2013 when I got a call that stuck with me ever since. It started like any other. A woman's voice came through, shaky but controlled. "There's someone in my house," she whispered. Her address came up automatically, somewhere in the Brooklyn neighborhood, just north of the Catholic University campus. I asked her the usual questions. If she could describe the person, if she was alone, where she was hiding. She said she lived alone and that she could hear the footsteps downstairs. It was around 2:20 a.m. She said she'd been asleep when she woke to what sounded like her front door creaking open. Then the steps started, slow and steady. I told her to stay on the line and to keep quiet while I dispatched an officer to her address. She whispered, "Please hurry," and then went silent again. I could hear faint creaks through the line, then what sounded like a floorboard groaning. The officer confirmed he was only a few blocks away. I tried to keep her calm, whispering that help was almost there, but she didn't answer. The line stayed open, though, and that's when I started hearing something else. Not footsteps, something heavier, like someone was dragging something across the floor. Then, very faintly, the sound of breathing, not hers, slow and deep. That's when the line suddenly went dead. When the call dropped, I immediately tried to reconnect. Nothing. The line went straight to static. I radioed the officer again. He was just pulling up to the address. I remember how quiet the dispatch room felt for those few seconds while I listened to him over the radio. Then his voice came back. "Dispatch, front doors locked, no sign of forced entry." He knocked a few times, called out for the resident. No response. He did a perimeter check while we tried calling her phone again, but she never picked up. A few minutes later, he confirmed that the lights were off inside, and everything looked undisturbed from the outside. By protocol, they couldn't force entry without probable cause, but the officer said he'd stay nearby for a bit. About 20 minutes later, he radioed in again. Still no sign of movement inside, no further noise. Eventually, the call was marked as unresolved, and we moved on. I took another call right after that, someone reporting fireworks or gunshots in Anacostia, and tried not to think about the woman's voice or the sound of that breathing. But something about the way the line had cut, so sudden, so final, stuck in my head. The next afternoon, I couldn't shake it. I looked up the address out of curiosity, which isn't something we're technically supposed to do. What I found made my stomach twist. The woman who had called had moved into that house less than a week before. The landlord's contact info was still listed online, so I made up an excuse and called, pretending I needed to confirm an emergency record. He said the tenant was still settling in and that he hadn't heard from her in a few days. I hung up without saying anything else. Something felt really wrong. The next night, around the same time, just after 2 a.m., I was on another late shift. Out of nowhere, a call came in from the same number. I froze when I saw it on my screen. I answered immediately, but no one spoke. I could hear faint noise like the line was open from somewhere quiet. I said hello a few times. Then I heard it again, that same slow breathing. It wasn't panicked this time. It was steady, controlled. The same kind of breathing I'd heard right before the first call dropped. I called out the address to the nearest patrol car, and the officer confirmed he was only 2 blocks away. This time, he didn't even knock. The door was unlocked when he got there. I could hear him on the radio as he moved through the house, calling out MPD, and then silence. Maybe 10 seconds later, he came back on, sounding tense. "Dispatch, there's no one here. Place looks abandoned." He said there were still boxes stacked by the entryway, but dust had already started to settle on them, like they hadn't been touched in days. He checked upstairs and found a phone lying on the hallway floor. It was still powered on, still connected to the line. Our line. They later traced the call logs and confirmed what I already suspected. The phone had dialed 911 twice. Once the night she called, and once the following night. But there were fingerprints on the phone that didn't belong to the woman who'd rented the house. And she was never found. I've taken thousands of calls since then, but that one still gets to me. The way she whispered that someone was inside, the way the breathing came back, and that last thing I heard before the line went dead. Right before it cut out, a man's voice, very close to the receiver, whispered, "Don't hang up." I've been driving long-haul routes since 2010, mostly running loads between California and Utah. By 2013, I'd gotten used to spending nights parked in the middle of nowhere. You learn to sleep through diesel engines idling, distant trains, even the occasional drunk knocking on your door by mistake. That night, I was heading east on I-80 through Nevada, hauling auto parts. I remember checking my clock, 11:47 p.m., when I pulled into a rest area just west of Winnemucca. The lot was completely empty except for one RV on the far side and a dim light flickering above the restrooms. I was exhausted, so I backed into a space under one of the lamps, killed the engine, and locked up. The air outside had that dry desert chill that seeps in even with the windows closed. Before crawling into the sleeper, I did what I always do. Pulled the thick blackout curtains across the windshield and side windows. The world outside goes completely dark when you do that. It's like cutting yourself off from everything. Safe, but isolating. I scrolled through my phone for a bit, caught a weak LTE signal, and checked in with my dispatcher. My husband texted "Good night, honey" from back home in Sacramento, and my reply was the last message I sent before turning the phone face down and trying to sleep. I don't know how long I was out before I woke up again. At first, I thought the sound I was hearing was just wind hitting the trailer, but then I realized it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Slow footsteps. They crunched over gravel, circled toward the passenger side of the cab, stopped, then started again. I held my breath, straining to hear through the thick curtains. When something gently tapped twice on the door handle, I froze. It wasn't loud, but it was close. Someone was right outside my truck. I didn't move at first. My brain raced, trying to make sense of it. My truck's interior felt suddenly tiny and exposed. Every instinct told me not to look, not to make a sound, just wait until whoever or whatever went away. The tapping continued, slow and deliberate, circling the rig. Then there was silence. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the quiet hum of my AC. After what felt like forever, I worked up the courage to peek through the driver's side window. Nothing. The lot was empty, the restroom light flickering faintly in the distance. I scanned the ground, and my stomach dropped. A single line of boot prints led from my truck's door straight to the restroom, but none came back. I checked the other side. Nothing. Whoever had been circling me wasn't there anymore, and the prints didn't make any sense. It was like they'd evaporated after leaving that one trail. I debated calling 911. My phone had signal, but I kept it silent on the passenger seat, trying to think. I considered honking the horn or running to the restroom myself, but every option felt like a trap. All I could do was sit, breathe shallowly, and listen. That's when I noticed it. Faint, scratching noises from the roof of my cab, like someone walking above me on the trailer. My fear spiked. I wasn't just being watched, I was being toyed with. The scratching on the roof moved toward the back of the cab, then stopped. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my fingers hovering over the ignition key. My mind scrambled between logic and fear. Maybe it was an animal, or some drifter trying to hitch a ride. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. Whoever had walked around my truck had taken their time. They'd watched me. I finally turned the key and the engine roared to life, its vibration rattling the cup in my console. The sound must have startled whoever was up there because I heard a sudden thump, like someone dropping off the trailer and hitting the ground hard. I shifted into drive and peeled out of the lot, tires spitting gravel behind me. My headlights swept across the bathroom building for just a second, and that's when I saw it. A tall man, standing perfectly still near the doorway, staring at me as I sped off. He wasn't holding anything, just watching. I looked back once in the rearview mirror, and he was gone. When I reached the next truck stop about 40 miles down the road, I finally called the highway patrol. They sent a unit to check, but the officer told me later they found no one. Just a single set of boot prints leading from where I'd parked to the restroom door. No return prints. I never took that route at night again. Later, I heard other truckers mention that rest stop. They'd heard rumors of strange sightings there. I didn't tell them what I saw. Even now, every time I park for the night, I draw the curtains tight and leave the engine running a while longer, praying I won't hear those footsteps again. I live alone in a small apartment in the Condesa neighborhood of Mexico City. It's not the fanciest place, but it's comfortable, and I've been here for almost 3 years. Most nights are quiet, just the hum of traffic and the occasional siren in the distance. I work as a graphic designer, which keeps me busy during the day, so my nights are usually spent catching up on shows or sketching in my notebook. It's a routine I've grown comfortable with, and I rarely notice anything out of the ordinary. It started one night in late autumn of 2013. Around 3 a.m., I began hearing soft tapping at the windows of my apartment. I assumed it was just branches brushing against the glass, or maybe my neighbor upstairs. I would get up, peek out the window, and see nothing, just the dark streets below. The tapping was gentle and almost rhythmic, so I chalked it up to the city itself making its usual noises at night. I didn't think much of it. After the third night, the tapping seemed to have a pattern. It would start softly, almost like someone was testing the glass, and then stop as soon as I approached the window. I even began leaving the lights on and checking every corner of the apartment, but nothing was ever there. I told myself I was imagining things, that the stress of work and late nights was making me paranoid. But each night, it returned at exactly 3 a.m., tapping, testing, waiting. By the fifth night, I was losing sleep. I tried wearing earbuds, turning on white noise, even sleeping on the couch with the blinds drawn. But no matter where I was, I could hear it. 3 light taps on the glass. Pause. Then 2 more. It was deliberate. I started to wonder if it could be someone trying to mess with me. My apartment faces a narrow alley, and someone could reach my windows if they climbed the fire escape. The thought made my skin crawl. I asked my neighbor Marta if she'd noticed anything strange. She shook her head and laughed it off, saying maybe I had a romantic ghost visiting me at night. But later that evening, as I was coming back from the corner store with a coffee, I caught her standing in her window, staring at me. When I waved, she quickly closed her curtains. That unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. For the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't the only one hearing it. That night, I decided to stay up and record the sound. I set my phone by the window and hit record around 2:50 a.m., waiting in the dark. At 3:03, it began. Tap, tap, tap. My heart was pounding as I stared at the glass, but then something changed. Between the taps, I heard a faint breath, like someone exhaling right on the other side. Then a whisper, too soft to make out, but my name was unmistakable. I froze, staring into the dark reflection of the window, but there was nothing there, only the light of my phone still recording. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I played the recording back. The tapping was clear, but what made my stomach twist was hearing my name whispered again, this time distinctly, as if a woman was saying it right next to the mic. I had no idea who it could be. I even checked the alley below. There were footprints on the fire escape and smudges on the lower part of my window. That was when I finally called the police. 2 officers came that evening and did a quick inspection. They didn't find signs of forced entry, but they did confirm that the lid marks looked recent. They told me to keep my windows locked and report if it happened again. I remember one of them, an older man, giving me a weird look before leaving, as if he wanted to say something but didn't. When I asked what it was, he just said, "Maybe keep your curtains closed at night," and walked off. That night, I did exactly that. I turned off the lights, locked everything, and went to bed with my phone recording again. The tapping started at 3:01 this time. Louder, more urgent, then silence. For almost a full minute, nothing. I thought maybe it was over. But when I played back the recording the next morning, I could hear something I hadn't noticed in real time. A soft voice, right after the taps. It said, "You finally moved here." My blood went cold. The voice belonged to my ex-girlfriend. She disappeared from social media 2 years earlier after we broke up in Guadalajara. I moved to Mexico City to start over, and I never told anyone where I went. Apparently, she had found me after all that time, and I still have no idea how or why. But luckily, the knocking never came back after that. My ex never showed up either. To this day, I still wonder why she did it, and if I'll ever hear from her again.